Kote was the king and where he lived, the fort. Pete was...
Right, Kote is the fort, right? Correct.
So the king lived there and the commerce happened here. And if you really see, even until today, it's commerce and politics, right? You support each other. The Mark Cubbon story, I love. Came here in the early 20s and never went back home. He spent his entire life in India and they realized that he's built his entire wealth to build cottages for the poor in the Isle of Man. And those cottages exist even today and they were called the Mysore cottages. And I also believe as a self-respecting South Indian, you shouldn't wait for an hour for your dosa. You should not.
That's true.
You should not.
Vinay, let's get to the heart of it.
Sure.
Right up front.
Okay, alright.
I do not understand the Petes. I was in conversation with Udaya on a previous podcast and he said the oldest locality in Bangalore is Bengaluru. Please explain the Petes and what it is.
See, I'm smiling because of two things, right? I'm so glad you said Pete. We used to have a walk called Pete Walk. People used to call it Pete Walk. And they asked me, who's Pete? Right? So there's no Pete. You know, I once had a group on the walk asking where you're from. And she said, I'm from the heart of Bangalore. So I said, Pete. She said, no, Bangalore Club. So I think the heart of Bangalore lies in different places.
For different people.
Right? Different people.
Yeah.
But Pete truly is special, right? Look, if you go to any part of the world, right? Traveling, if you go to London, you go to the oldest part of the city. If you go to Rome, the oldest part of the city. Barcelona, the oldest part of the city. Even Delhi, the oldest part of the city. And the oldest part of the city in Bangalore is Pete, right? But it is not a place that you go exploring because for all of us in Bangalore, Pete is a place for a transaction. You want to buy a book? Get out. Buy a sari? Get out. Buy jewelry? Whatever. Get out, right? This played on me for a long time, right? And I met somebody very interesting in Delhi once, Shoaib Hashmi. He is like the father of old Delhi walks.
Okay.
And he told me something very interesting. He said, Vinay, you know, Pete is the reason why I started walks in Delhi. I said, what do you mean in old Delhi? He said, you know, in 1971, I came to Bangalore because my JNU classmate, my closest friend was living in Bangalore. And he took me to Chickpete and I was so blown by this old city. And I said, we should start walks in old Delhi. And that's how old Delhi walks started. And old Delhi walks today is a phenomena. Pete is inspired old Delhi walk. Why are we not exploring Pete?
Right.
So that's when I think I had some good friends and he's an artist and if we just meet, we'd lose ourselves in Pete. And for me, it was very interesting to just explore what's happening there. You know, sometimes if you make, I tell this on the walk as well, if you make peace with the noise, the crowds, right? Keep that aside, just make peace with it. Now look at Pete. Right? There's so much beauty there. There's so much character there, right? There are 26 different Petes, right? And how
There are 26.
26, right? And how did the Petes went on to be formed? If you really look at the founding theses of Bangalore, it was the Pete and the Kote.
Explain Pete Kote.
So the Kote was the king and where he lived, the fort, right? And Pete was...
Right, Kote is the fort, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So the king lived there and the commerce happened here. And if you really see, even until today, it's commerce and politics, right? You support each other, right? And I think that was the beautiful amalgamation of the foundation of Bangalore, right? So when you looked at Pete, it really was a place for trade. What is Pete? Pete is a market, right? Okay. Chickpete was one of the markets there. It was not the entire market. You had Dodda Pete, you had Akki Pete, you had Bale Pete, you had Cotton Pete. So you had different Petes there, right? Back then, how did people choose to do different businesses? Do you think there was some kind of logic there?
I feel like when you mentioned the names, it kind of was a giveaway.
Yeah.
Because when you say cotton pete, I would imagine cotton traders.
Absolutely.
When you say bale pete, bangles,
absolutely,
I would imagine that
so you're right, but if you go one step behind, who would be trading cotton, who would be trading like this Nagarat pete, who would be trading oil, etc. There's also caste considerations. Oh. And which is why Pete, I very often talk about, because there are like hundreds of temples, and you think they're all similar. No, they're not. Each Pete had its own. Temple and temples, right? And again, I say, if you look at any temple in Pete, look behind, there'll be a tree. And most often it's either a peepal tree, a banyan tree, or a fig tree, because these are the only three holy trees in India. So when you start to explore Pete, it's a fascinating place. Some of the best food in the city is in Pete. If you want to buy, I mean, like the saris, right? Not just the sari, you see the entire supply chain, the zari where it comes from, you see the weaving, the packaging, and the showroom. Similarly, I think for the goldsmith, the silversmiths, right? You go to SJP Road and you're seeing the electronics there.
Yeah.
There's so much. There's Darzi Pete, which is the tailors, and they're the Marathi speaking. right? So Pete has a beautiful influence and it's gone on for hundreds of years. It was my interest to understand Pete and I said, come on, Pete is cool and we gotta make it interesting.
Right.
So we started what is called the Pete Walk.
Okay.
Right? And really nobody came, right? They all thought it's
the Pete Walk.
It's Pete Walk. And I said, this is not happening, so what do we do? So that's when I think post the pandemic, we changed that walk to Death by Dosa. It was called Death by Dosa. This November 1st, we changed it to Dosa. Historical wrong has been corrected. And, this is what I felt, right? We are storytellers. We're in the business of telling stories.
Yes.
There's no point preaching to the choir. People who already feel for the city and already know a lot about the city. But I think it's very important that today Bangalore attracts the best and the brightest from across the country, right? What is their experience of Bangalore? Living in Whitefield, living in an electronic city, and they're only complaining about no traffic. But if you can scratch the surface and get to understand a city. So that's when we said, let's change the name of Death by Dosa because everybody loves food.
Yeah.
And Pede has...
Like for some reason, just because you said Death by Dosa, I'm salivating already.
People have taken 4 a.m. flights from Delhi, Bombay to come do this walk.
People come from Delhi? Wow, that's mad.
Yeah. I mean, and I also believe as a self-respecting South Indian, you shouldn't wait for an hour for your dosa. You should not.
That's
right?
true.
You should not. Phenomenal food. So I think that's when we tweaked the tour to Death by Dosa. We included food. People come for the food, but then you really explore, the weavers, the Garadimanes, the heritage houses, the antique shops.
What is a Garadimane?
Oh, Garadimane is it's like an old wrestling house, like Dangal.
Oh, right. Okay.
I have some really cool Garadimanes there, and it also is one of the most famous festivals of Pete is Karaga.
Karaga
is the
festival.
largest congregation of people in Bangalore, and people practice in the Gaddis because they have to
carry the
goddess, right, for a while. So you're really seeing, and also it's beautiful to see the Hindu, Muslim. You have the Jummah Masjid street. So because Tipu is there, you have the Tara Mandal Pate, you have the Sufi mosque, you have the temples, you see the Maratha speakers who came because of Shaji, of course the Kannadigas, the Telugu. So you really see how cosmopolitan Pede was, right?
And they all lived in these.
Yeah. So I really, this is Viva, I became good friends with, right? His name was Shrikant. And he told me something very interesting. He said, Vinay, whatever you want in life, except for an IC engine, whatever else you want in life, it's a 5-minute walk in Pete. And I've done it as a test, right? You want food, you want jewelry, you want food, you want electronics, you want books, you name it. It's a 5-minute walk in Pete. So for me, Pete is a fascinating place. Absolutely fascinating place. It is the heart of Bangalore.
So in terms of a structure, you said there was the Kote, which is the fort, and then there was the Pete. So the Pete surrounded the fort in that sense?
So if you see the old maps, you have the fort and there's a fortification around it. And even around the Pete, there is a fortification around it, right? So just that we don't have the fort walls anymore. And inside, it is all the segregation, right? Based on caste considerations, because different castes did different trades. So that's when you had the Aki Pete, Cotton Pete, Nagrat Pete. Because, I think trade is a great normalizer, right? When you have to trade, right? It has to be of value, it has to be of respect, right? So I think, you say, if you're able to trade with each other, there will be peace. And I think that's the same ethos that Bangalore has carried forward today, right? If you really see, we are known as a tolerant city. We are known as a people have a lot of patience. Why do Kannadigas still speak Hindi, as auto drivers and all of it, right? We're very welcoming.
Something that you said was very interesting was that Bangalore's growth happened because of waves of migration. Obviously, one thing that immediately comes to mind is the tech. But how far back are you saying that that the growth of Bangalore happened because of migration waves?
I very often say it starts with a mosquito in Srirangapatna, right? The whole story about how when Tipu was defeated, the British cantonment was set up in Srirangapatna for the first 7-8 years, right? But there were a lot of deaths because of malaria there, right? Even if you garrison cemetery, still an existing cemetery there. And that's when the British felt that this place is not safe. Because of the water, we are dying. And the joke I often say is the mighty British Empire fell for the tiny mosquito. I think there were 4 short lists. You had Sira, you had Hosur, you had Bangalore, and I think the one other name escapes me, right? So these were the 4 short lists in terms of where can we move the cantonment. And finally they decided on Bangalore. So they move away from the Pete and whatever Cubbon is the buffer zone, and they set up the cantonment, right? But I think another inflicting point was at the turn of the century, gold is found in Kolar, right? It's one of the largest deposits of gold in the whole world, and it had to be dug out. So the Maharaja and Sheshadri Raya Vidhan They send their best engineers to Niagara. Why Niagara? Because it's the first place in the world for hydroelectricity, and they decide to set up the first hydroelectric plant in Shivanasamudra. And the first transmission line goes to KGF. It's the world's longest transmission line at that point in time. And the first city to get street lighting in the whole of Asia is Bangalore.
Yeah.
Right. So with electricity coming in, that really changes the game. Right. What do you see is industrialization. You have divans like Vishwesvaraya. And if you really see the industrialization that's happened in Mysore, the Mysore lamps, the Mysore iron steel, Mysore paper, Mysore soap, Mysore sandal, Mysore silk, it can go on and on and on, right? Industrialization happens, but something else also happens, right? Mysore University is the first university among princely states. Oh. Right, so education is given out. Central College as well is a renowned, and ISC happens as well, right? At the same time, it's a landmark space for science and technology. So when you see these two happen, right, great educational institutions and electricity, because of which industries start, which I think was almost like gunpowder for the knowledge economy, right? And in 1936, the British, of all the places we ruled, 1/4 of the world, the most prosperous and the most progressive is the Mysore state. It's in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So I think that's how progressive Mysore was. Post-independence, what we saw is a wave of PSUs. Again, we got lucky because Nehru took a liking to Bangalore. It was also geographical consideration because our problems with Pakistan and the border. All our defense, tech, manufacturing was largely based out of Bangalore, the PSU wave. HL, of course, came in the 1940s. HMT, ITI, BEML, BHL, DRDO, NL, you can name so many of them, right? Clearly, I think that was a great wave. I grew up in one such PSU in the NL campus. You had people from across the country. In the 80s and 90s, we saw the IT wave start off, I think Infosys and Wipro, and all of it is backed on one wave after the other, because for the IT wave to happen, you need to have educated people, right? The people working in these PSUs send their kids to good colleges, right? When the IT wave happened, clearly, you started to see the change in Bangalore at the turn of the century. And today it's the startup capital. So today when you look at Bangalore, the startup capital, I think it's waves of innovation that's happened. So either we go back to the gold of the mosquito or the Pete in the Kote. Right?
Gully Tours.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do this?
Grew up in Bangalore, so I had to be an engineer. So
okay.
I'm an engineer, but I recovered is what I tell people, right? So I think growing up in Bangalore,
where was growing up for you?
So for me, growing up, I was born in Rajajinagar.
Okay.
Because my grandparents lived there. Navratna Jewelers, I think that used to be my grandfather's house, and I was born like 2 doors next door in Guru Krupa nursing home. I think the first few years of my life was in Yashwanthpur because my dad was a teacher. He used to teach in KVISC. Then he moved to KVNAL.
Okay.
So I think I was in class 1 and we all moved to the NAL campus.
Right.
And the next 12 years was there, and I think that was a glorious time for us. I mean, I had friends growing up from all across the country. Some from Kerala, Tamil Nadu. I very often say Abhinandan Vartman was my classmate in school, right? The fighter pilot who got caught in that whole India-Pakistan bid. So I think it was very cosmopolitan for us because growing up in a PSU and also now when I look at the Kant side of Bangalore, right, going to school, I think it was very diverse. So I was there until class 12, and then my dad was moving to Mysore because he became the principal of a school there, and I didn't want to leave Bangalore, and I had an option to go to RV or BMS, but he arm twisted me. I went engineering in Mysore, I went to SJC, but Mysore was a city that really grew on me, though I didn't like it when I went there. So I think I got on a tech. So that's when I moved to Bangalore. So the first 3 years I was in Bangalore, and what happens to somebody who's in tech? For a few years, you have to go out of the country on a project. So that's how I landed up in Singapore.
Okay.
And I used to work with the Swiss bank there. The travel bug in me started quite early because my dad, I think, always had an aim, right? Every year we would travel, and every few years we would take this long vacation because he was in the government services, the central government.
LTA.
LTO, LTC, leave travel allowance, LTA.
LTA,
Phenomenal trips, right? I remember before he quit, we all went to Delhi and then Manali and the whole of the north, right? And none of the what are the religious places, right? It was all about exploration. And I mean that really stayed with me, right? The whole exploring the country. So I really pretty much seen the length and breadth of the country by the time I was 18 or 20. So when I went to Singapore, I said, wow, this is great, and I really traveled across Southeast Asia. But two things happened. I think I was so enamored by the travel tourism ecosystem in Southeast Asia, right? And I went on a chance walking tour in Singapore, and it really blew my mind. It was in the Chinatown district. It really appealed to me on travel trivia and people. So at the end of the walk, I told the lady that, this is brilliant. I'm going to go back and start something like this back home. And if this is where my heart lies, then I should do that. And it was very interesting because I got gifted this book called The Lonely Planet Story. It's about the couple who started the Lonely Planet Empire. And it's a phenomenal story about how they get married in London and they're on a Volkswagen camper van and they come all the way, long story short, they go to Australia and they say, we're going to drive taxis for 6 months and then, make enough money to fly back home. In that 6 months, people are asking them, oh, you traveled here, traveled there, what do you do, etc., etc. And that's how they said, they just get a little book and give it to them and be done, and there was no looking back. Right? They really built an entire empire, and that was a very inspiring story for a 24-year-old that you can really do something in travel, right? So, and I felt that if Singapore, with 40, 50 years of history, attracts more tourists in the whole of India, it's true even today. Singapore gets about 18, we get about 10 for the entire country, and Singapore is half of Bangalore. And I said, look at how well they've packaged and marketed what they have, and we sit on 5,000 years of history, right? And I also feel in India, the tourist guide unfortunately has become the lowest common denominator, right? If you really can't do anything else. And movies like Bunty and Bubbly and all haven't helped, right? I think that stereotype has been, I think there's certain stereotypes, and I think it's also, I think, what's peddled in society and in our culture, right? Jack Ma was a tour guide in Beijing for 2 years before he started Alibaba, because I think it's extremely hard, out in public to hold somebody's attention, to make it interesting. This is like a live reality show. It was, I think, a mix of frustration, a mix of following my passion, seeing an opportunity, and saying, this is what I feel for, and I think that's why I came back and started this in 2009. On the 2nd of April, I was very, very clear. I didn't want to be a fool on the 1st. Didn't help at all.
This is still you at 24?
Yeah.
Were you thinking of this as something that would make you your money as well?
When I started this, for me it was not a hobby. I immensely enjoyed it, and I really wanted to see how can you build something sustainable out of it, right? I mean, that was always the case, right? And a meaningful business around it, and not just centered around me, right? So today we're a 25-member team, right, at Gully. I'm also a leadership coach, I'm a certified coach, and I do a lot of business storytelling sessions with founders and corporates, right? Because what are you doing whether you're trying to raise funding, you're trying to get another job, or trying to find a partner, what are you doing? It's storytelling.
You're telling a
How
story,
do you hold their attention and tell a great story? And what better than this to teach you that, right? Because day in and day out, you're going and holding people's attention and telling them a good story, and you're waiting for the feedback, you're getting better at it, etc. So I feel I really dislike the term soft skills, Jimmy, because there's nothing soft about this, right? These are life skills, and I think that's what our graduates are really missing today, right? Academically, they're so brilliant.
How did Dad react to you saying, I'm quitting my job, I am going to walk and tell people stories? Please explain how Mr. Educator, who took you to Mysore to do engineering, reacted to this.
Oh God. So it's so funny. Two things, right? So my dad would always introduce me for the first couple of years as Nan Maga, software engineer agida. My son used to be a software engineer. Right? And so my parents are like, what's wrong with you? And my dad is the principal of the school, so I think people look up to him, and they're like, how can your son become a tour guide? So it was, I think, socially very unacceptable. Very difficult for them. And I mean, come on, in 2009, if you're telling people that we're going to be doing walking tours, even today, a lot of people don't understand. I don't blame them, right? It was very difficult, but I'm very glad that though they didn't understand me, they allowed me to do what I want to do.
Your travel obviously has to take you to Devanahalli. Is there a story about Devanahalli that we don't really know?
Of course, historically, Tipu was born there. The Devanahalli Fort, again, was Hyder Ali's Jagir, so I think that has a lot of history. Bangalore Blues, the grapes, which has a GI. I don't know if Bangalore Blues has a GI tag.
Yeah, it does. Bangalore Blues has a GI tag.
Okay, because the Pomelo does. And the Bangalore Blues was the first instance of outsourcing because the Maharaja grew it at scale because it was cheaper to make wine here and send it to Europe. If you go to the archive, you will see all that description. You also have the Pomelo Research Station. The Devanahalli Pomelo is the world's largest citrus fruit. It's a very, very cool place, right? There's a research station and you have these massive...
Where is this?
So when you pass the airport and in the first signal where you have this darshini on the left,
yes,
right, and you take a right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where you also have the mini Vidhan Soudha and the registrar's office and all of it, right?
Okay.
Just go up there and it's about 100 meters on the right. It says Devanahalli Pomelo Research Center. It's an extremely cool place. And there's so much enthusiasm to explain. It's the world's largest citrus fruit.
What are you saying? Wow.
So which is why if you get to Devanahalli, all the carts are selling you pomelo. And also now with the Terminal 2 airport coming in, there's a 12,000 seater performance arena that's being built out. You'll have 700 hotel rooms in that vicinary. And that's what we were talking about yesterday as well. I think it's going to be like Singapore where if you have a 12-hour transit, you just want to explore that part and
that area and leave.
So I think that place is so much. But I mean, the other month I was there and the Defence Park is insane. I think it's probably bigger than Whitefield. It's massive. Having said that, I must say, Whitefield has a lot of history.
Please tell.
Whitefield is an extremely cool place. It was the Anglo-Indian community where the Maharaja gave them like 4,000 acres or something like that, like a really large piece of land. And a lot of them living there actually worked in the cola gold mines. Right? Okay. And what about D.S. White, and he was the founder. And even today, if you go to Google Maps, it's you can really see the inner circle and the outer circle.
Yeah.
It's so cool. You have the old Whitefield club there, the church there.
It's a very quaint little club.
Absolutely. And that Waverley Inn where Winston Churchill went and stayed and whatever, he used to date a girl there.
Pete is very close to your heart in terms of the walk, but is there another favorite walk of yours?
I really like our Malleshwaram Hogana on a Sunday morning.
Okay.
So Malleshwaram Hogana was a project that was a New York-based NGO. Along with BBMP.
Yeah.
It was an artist collective called Gichugulu.
Yes.
And we had a bunch of local NGOs and we were partners to design the walk. And the whole idea was, how do you make Malleshwaram safe for women for walking and cycling? That was the mandate.
For walking and cycling?
Walking and cycling for women, for women mobility, right? And the entire project is in conservancy lanes. It's a phenomenal project, right?
That's also when the painting and the murals and all of the conservancy lanes happened.
Yeah, exactly. It was that project,
the
whole painting of the conservancy lanes, right? So now that I had to design this walk, I really started to go there and spend a lot of time, walk around, and that place has so much character, Malleshwaram, so much character, right? Baswangudi and Malleshwaram, the two planned layouts after the plague, and a lot of people think it's Malgudi is named after Malleshwaram
and Baswangudi.
But it's not true. So I had the great honor no, it's not true. I had the great honor of meeting R.K. Lakshman in Mysore in 2009, and I asked him this question, right? That because Malgudi is supposed to be a mythical place.
Yeah, it's a made-up place.
And but a lot of the characters in Malgudi days are real-life people in Mysore. Like your Printer Marge and all of it, right? Because we have a Malgudi walk in Mysore. We did a lot of research on that, right?
See how you gently went off to Mysore?
Mysore, no?
How quietly from Malleshwaram you went off?
Because the Malgudi story is on the walk of Malleshwaram, right?
Okay.
But in a long story short, I asked him and he said you should have asked Kunjappa. Basically, you should have asked R.K. Narayan. That isn't true is what people say. In fact, there's a beautiful like a picturization of Malgudi that he's actually drawn the mountains and all of it. But nowhere he's exhibited Malleshwaram and Baswangudi.
Oh, interesting.
But the Malleshwaram walk, and especially on a Sunday morning, right? There's something beautiful. We start the walk from CTR, and Ganesha CTR is always very kind to give us priority seating, which I think is the highlight of the walk. I tell people very openly, it's downhill from here. You had your dosa. Just the character that place still holds is very, very beautiful. So I really enjoy the Malleshwaram Hogana. And we do a Colonial crawl, which is Cubbon Park and MG Road and all of that, right? And again, it's a beautiful look, especially, one of the things I've always enjoyed. So I lived in London for a couple of years and I really enjoyed the parks there. And I miss walking in the city as much, right? And especially after coming back, what I would do, I was living in Danaga, and just take the metro, get to Cubbon, and just spend like a couple of hours on a Sunday morning. And even now, as much as possible, I try to get to Cubbon on a Sunday morning, right? And
it's a very nice vibe. With the people bringing their dogs to the dog park, people skating, cycling, walking. It's a very nice
So
vibe.
if you do a colonial crawl there, and there's so much in the park there. I think I really take it as a compliment because before the Vidhan Soudha project, the entire tourism department came on the walk. Right?
Oh, nice.
And because what is that we're trying to achieve, right? From the secretary to the MD and all of them. There were about 25-30 people. I remember one of the senior officers telling me, Vinay, what is there in Cubbon? Why should we go and spend 2 hours? He was an IS officer and he said, at last I came out at 8 standard, right? And we did the walk and he came and I said, Vinay, I was mind blown. I really didn't know there is so much. There's so much. Just walking around here and know all the details there, right? It's also a great place to walk. So I really enjoy the colonial crawl and then coming out and
Tell 2 stories.
The Mark Cubbon story I love. Okay. So this is in 2019 November. This British couple reached out to me, right? They said they wanted to spend 2 or 3 days in Bangalore and they only wanted to trace Mark Cubbon. I'm like, okay. I mean, what is this fascination? Only Mark Cubbon. I always say yes to any kind of request because even if I don't know it, because it's a great opportunity for me to learn. Right. So I mean, all I knew was Cubbon Park, really, right? And then I started research about this man, and I was mind blown because Cubbon was this character who came from a little island called the Isle of Man.
Yes.
Right?
So just opposite Cubbon Park, there's this bike store that says Isle of Man so many kilometers.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Which side?
You know where the Cubbon Park police station is? Just opposite that is the Isle of Man store and it says so many kilometers to the Isle of Man.
He's born in a little island called the Isle of Man. His uncle, Colonel Wilkes, has fought the last war of Srirangapatna. So he's really looked up to this really cool uncle who's gone to the exotic destination and fought these wars. So he wants to come to India and he's probably early 20s, gets on a ship, comes to India, joins the British services, pretty much a low-ranking officer, and eventually becomes the commissioner of Bangalore. Actually, he's the commissioner of Mysore and Cook, right? That's what his statue even today says. In fact, the statue used to be in front of the High Court and then it got moved. The statue has a great story as well. And he, for about 30 years, I think he's the commissioner. He quits not once but twice, but people say, no, we need this man back. Because he's done a lot of great things for the city, like reduces corruption, new roads and all of that, right? You have Cubbon Pete in Chickpete.
Yes.
That's where the weaver community is, and that was set up by Mark Cubbon.
Okay.
So we went and actually met the weavers there, and the weavers so blown that this couple came from the Isle of Man, right? Researching Mark Cubbon. You have Cubbon Road, right? High Court was his office. Right?
High Court was his office.
You used to have a painting of Mark Cubbon inside because that was the head of administration for the British Cantonment, right? And he was the commissioner. He had a summer palace, which is I think like an inspection bungalow on top of Nandi Hills, right? He was a really, really cool guy. And I told this couple, we went to all these places and it was phenomenal. And I told this couple, there's one place where I can't take you because his house is now, Cubbon's house is the governor's residence. So that is the house that Mark Cubbon built in the 1850s. Actually, it was built by somebody else. And anyway, I think there's a story.
This is Raj Bhavan.
Raj Bhavan, which is I think now Lok Bhavan, right? But that's Mark Cubbon's house, right? So I tell them that this is one place I can't take you. So we go outside the governor's house and we are looking at the whole place. There's so much security, and the cops are asking us what do we do, and I'm telling them so and so, and they're like, yeah, sorry, we can't let you in. Comes a car, stops, he says, what's happening? And that's the ADC to the governor. He gets and he says, come in. And we get a private tour.
What?
Oh, Rajwan, phenomenal. And I know we sit in the ADC's office, with teacups, with the insignia. It's a 16-acre campus. It's the house hasn't changed. It's still the same. Phenomenal, right? And I got curious and I asked this couple, why did you come looking for Mark Cubbon? And they told me the part of the story that I had not found anywhere. And they said, Mark Cubbon came here in the early 20s and never went back home.
Okay.
Right? He spent his entire life in India until he was 60-something. He finished his service and he decides, because his sister is ill in the Isle of Man, he decides, okay, I need to go back. He gets on a ship and he's traveling back to UK, but he dies near the Suez Canal. Right? They take the body to the Isle of Man and they realize that he's willed his entire wealth, his entire estate, to build cottages for the poor in the Isle of Man, and those cottages exist even today, and they were called the Mysore cottages. So this couple, this lady especially, would really walk past the cottage all her life and look at what's the story behind it, and then always stayed with her and she wanted to come and explore. And she had a book with her called From Man to Mysore, the story of Colonel Wilkes and Mark Cubbon, right? And he never married, and like what a character. And what I didn't know was she was a minister of treasury in the Isle of Man, and not once she told me about this or threw away it, but it was a phenomenal
So
experience.
nice. Lovely. That's story 1. Story 2 about Cubbon Park?
I've never really got to the bottom of it, right? The color of the High Court,
Yes.
right? It's red,
Yeah.
right? But if you really distill, it's called Pompeii red. That's the real name of the color. You see, where else do you find that? You find it in the Government House, you'll find it in the State Library, and it was very much a colonial color. But the question was, why did the British use this color, right? And there's several stories to it, right? Even if you look it up. One of the stories say in the 1850s, this is the color of power. In UK, like especially their dining rooms and all of it was this color. Every time I go past the High Court, then just to look at that red, it's such a cool red. Mark Cubbon statue, the Chief Justice chair in the High Court, and the Speaker's chair in Vidhan Soudha are on the straight line. I don't know why, but it's all on a straight line. It's so cool, right? It's so cool.
Wow.
And if you actually go to that point, just before Cubbon statue, you can so beautifully see the urn, Cubbon statue, High Court, and right behind it, the top of Vidhan Soudha, right? And Vidhan Soudha was built right opposite the High Court because Kengal Hanumanthaiah wanted it to overlook and overshadow the British seat of power, and also he wanted it to be bigger than the Mysore Palace because he felt the transfer of power is happening from the British to the Indians and from the Maharaja to the people of the country. So Vidhan Soudha is a phenomenal story, right? So I think that's another story on Cubbon that
Sweet. What are some of the places that you loved that have vanished?
So I'll tell you two again, right? So one has stayed on and I think one has vanished, right? So growing up, every time my dad said, let's go to Cubbon Park, it was not Cubbon Park, we went to Bal Bhavan and got the toy train.
Yes.
Right? That for
they also had like a Ferris wheel and all of that over there. Yeah, they had this amusement,
and the
little
cotton
amusement
candy
park.
and that joy ice cream in a ball and all of it.
God.
So for me, Cubbon Park was always about going to Bal Bhavan.
Correct.
Bal Bhavan for we kids was like, I don't know, what is the equivalent today? It was like Disneyland for us. Right? It was like so cool and all that happening, and that's still there, and the toy train still operates and all of it. So I think that's a part of childhood memory that still stays. But another part of my childhood memory that stayed with me for the longest time, because like I said, we used to live in Old Airport Road. My grandparents used to live in Rajajinagar, and used to do that bit. And every time we went past Kastuba Road, jutting out almost on an island was this really cool looking building and a restaurant called Tiffany's.
Yes.
It was really, really cool, right? Really cool. It was round and these glasses around, and I never went to that restaurant. I always would wonder how is it to sit inside Tiffany's and have a meal or have a breakfast, and anyway we lost that.
Have you been to the aquarium at Cubbon Park?
No, I haven't. I've heard a lot of cool things about it, but I haven't.
It's only 5 rupees entry.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So when we were in school, if we had holidays, we would get $100 to go watch a movie, right?
Wow.
So we used to get like $5 to come in the bus and whatever, $5 to come and go. So $10 is gone on transportation, and we used to go and we couldn't afford balcony. It was some $70 or whatever.
Gandhi class.
Exactly, Gandhi class, and I think a little behind Gandhi class is some $40 or $50 or whatever. I think $40. Anyway, $40-$50, right? So it'd either be Wimpy's or Indiana, because I think their burgers are like some 30 something. And I still remember going to Indiana, getting my first ever burger, opening up there. Why is there a bloody leaf inside?
Oh, the Indianas reminds me of their mayo.
Yeah,
they were so famous for their mayo. In fact, with one burger, I think we'd finish a bottle of mayo. It was so yum. I don't know what they mixed in it, but it was damn cool. And Woodlands, no, sorry. Woodies.
Yeah, the Madhur Vada and Woodies was really a treat. Woodies is still there, right?
I think it's still there. Yeah.
That used to be iconic on Commercial Street, right? Motor Royal Arcade or Fifth Avenue, right?
God.
It was a lot of fun because me and my cousin, we would take up the escalator up and down. That's what I miss in malls today, because you don't have an escalator going up and the next one coming down. You got to go to the other end of the mall and come down. I hate it, right? That's design thinking, because they want us to shop.
Yeah, that's right.
I hate that. And that was so cool. cool. You go up and kill that. Yeah, so I think that was the thing. Yeah, Brigade Road I think was very, very cool. I also remember India Coffee House when it was on MG Road.
On MG Road, yeah.
Right, and the boulevard on MG Road was beautiful. Beautiful. Man. That was really, really
beautiful. I mean, just yesterday I think I was at a show where someone was doing is the Bangalore Sonic Archives, this guy named Sakkare from Dharwad, and he sampled a lot of like Kannada music and the visuals. There was actually this shot of MG Road in that without the metro.
Yeah.
Like, man, you could stand at Anil Kumble Circle and see all the way to Trinity.
Yeah.
Missed so much of that has gone.
Yeah. I this reminds me, Jimmy, I read this somewhere. They say, my nostalgia is better than yours. I think when you go down this trip, right? It's so beautiful, I think. Pretty grew up with.
So you've been a Bangalore boy all your life. I mean,
most of my life.
With large part of your life. What for you would you say that this happens only in Bangalore?
We're probably the only city in the country that I know of. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We take our work seriously, right? I think that for me, in a lot of ways, is Bangalore, right? It's also, I think, very much about camaraderie, right? I mean, right? So when I quit, very much to the distaste of my parents, right? I had to like really fight a lot of battles, right? And every time they would ask me, I think the only example that I had was, look at Narayan Murthy. He came from a middle class family and he became an entrepreneur. And my parents were just fried with him. Like, one man, every time you talk about it, like one man that you just stop. Like, if there was a battle at home, Mr. Narayan Murthy's name was like, always thrown up, right? But for me, I really looked up to the Infosys fund because how so cool in the 80s, they all came together and said, you know what, let's create something, I'm sure they were having fun and let's create something of value. So years later, I think we also got to do work with Infosys, and it was after I'd come back from UK and I wanted to meet him, so I just shot him an email.
You just wrote to him?
Yeah.
Just randomly?
I knew somebody at Infosys. Yeah, we've done a lot of work with Infosys. So I wrote to Mr. Narayan Murthy, and saying I'm so and so and I'd love to meet you. And I remember it was in May of 2016. His son-in-law just won the elections, right? He just won the elections. And he replied back within a matter of a few hours. He copied his secretary and said, I'm very happy to meet you and please schedule time. And I think he gave me time in June or July because he was traveling, right? They got back and they gave me the location of the office. It was in JP Nagar. And I went there and I'm like, okay, this is happening. And you checked in and they have a beautiful, like a waiting room. I think it's Padma Shri and all of it kept there. The staff was very, very polite, like all of it. And I remember, I think he gave me like an hour's time. I think it was 2:30. And I was taken to a conference room by his secretary and I was made to sit. And sharp at 2:30 he walked in and I shook his hand and I said, thank you so much, sir, for taking time out to see me. He said, no, I want to meet you as well. It was such a lovely conversation. For me, he was a hero, right? I think what he did. This would only happen in Bangalore. In Bombay, I don't know if you write to the Ambanis, you will get to meet them, or in Delhi, if you write to people in power. But in Bangalore, because I think it's very much, it's about paying it forward. 2009, right, where I just started the business. In November of 2009, the Global Tech Conference was happening in Mysore, and it was a big deal. And I was very keen on doing some walks and tours for them. I had written to a lot of people in Infosys and I had got no response. And one of my earliest guests was Miss Jessie Paul. She was the Chief Marketing Officer of Wipro back then. And her husband and her mum came on the walk.
This is in Bangalore?
In Mysore.
In Mysore.
Her husband, I think he heads ING Vaishya. Great in trivia. I think he's probably the only guy till date who's cracked all my trivia on the walk. Right? I have a bunch of trivia things and it was really, really cool. At the end of the walk, she had written a fantastic book called No Money Marketing, Jessie Paul, and she gave me a signed copy. At the end of the walk, I asked her that, the TED conference is happening and I've written to a bunch of people in Infosys and I haven't got a response. Wondering what do you think I should do? Because before that, she was the Chief Marketing Officer of Infosys. And she said, who do you write to? And I said, she said, they're not senior. I mean, for a Chief Marketing Officer, the only person senior is the CEO, I suppose, right? And she said, why don't you write to Nandan? I said, who? She said, Nandan Nilekani, and he has a soft corner for entrepreneurs. And she gave me the email address. I'm like, really? And Mr. Nandan Nilekani was doing the Aadhaar project. He was a cabinet level minister. And I came home and I remember throwing the piece of paper on my table. I was like, why would Mr. Nilekani even respond to me? I said, forget it. And the next day I woke up and said, what do I lose if I write? And I remember I typed out a nice long email and I signed off saying budding entrepreneur. Right?
Well done.
And I hit send. A week later he responded and he said, please get in touch with this lady. And I was in the moon. Really, Mr. Nandan Nilekani takes time out to respond to just a random email, and I followed up and I actually did a walk with the TED conference. And that was a huge high.
Yeah.
Huge high. You just reach out and you try. And I think that's another Bangalorean thing, right? Where you just write to people. You don't have any common connection. You just write to them and they come back to you. So I think that's, and which is why I think today we have the startup ecosystem here, because it's very much about giving, and I think how it all adds up. It's that culture of giving, right? Making connections. I think that's Bangalore.
Yeah. Before we started, you were telling me about this auto driver from Mandya as well. What is it that you said about what he said? Bangalore is like a
mother, she's like a Thai, and who keeps giving, right? Giving. I think he was talking about how he came from a little village near Mandya, and there was a lot of debt in the family, and sisters to get married, lost his father, and he came to Bangalore 20 years ago, just an auto rickshaw, blah blah blah. And today he owned 3 auto rickshaws. Sir, Bengaluru Thai tara sir, kodtane irutte, right? It's like a mother that keeps giving, and I think that's something I think has always stayed with me, right? This is a city of immense opportunity, and sometimes I feel bad that when you talk to the old Bangaloreans, you're looking at the problems, right? Traffic, which I'm sure is a problem. I'm not taking it away. If you also talk to the new folks who've come in, they're also talking about the problems. Why are the old folks still here and why are the new folks coming? Right? I think somewhere we're missing the big picture, but this is truly a city of opportunities. And it's always, I think, for us to work together and to see how do we make it better. There's no doubt about that.
True. You also do a Vidhan Soudha tour.
Yeah, we designed the tour and we trained the folks there. So when I started out doing the walks in Mysore, one of my first clients was ATI, Administrative Training Institute, right?
Okay.
I didn't know anything much about the organization. Somebody told me about it, and it's a training institute for all bureaucrats, right from your IAS officers all the way to Panchayat Raj. Right. And that was my first client, and I have a lot of regard for the IAS officer, Ms. Amita Prasad, and she said, you're like my son and I'll support you. So I just spoke to her last week as well. Over the next 4 years, from 2009 to 2013, almost 5,000 officers did this walk. Right, and
this is in Mysore.
In Mysore, all in Mysore, right? And one of the folks who had come on the walk was Ms. Shalini Rajneesh, and she was then the regional secretary of Gulbarga, and she really enjoyed the walk. About 2 years ago, we did a little event at NGMA, the City Explorer, the pitch day. I invited ma'am, and one of the bits that we talked about is, ma'am, a tour in Vidhan Soudha. Ma'am said it's a great idea because I was in Canberra in Australia, and you can actually visit the Parliament House there. I think that's how the conversation started, but I think it was a lot of discussions internally, and I think eventually it had to come from the CM's office. I think that pretty much took almost 9 months. It was the first legislative building in the country to be opened up for public, and it was a phenomenal experience because very often we sit on the outside and complain about people in power, either politics or bureaucracy. I really got to see how the government works at very close quarters, and it was a phenomenal experience. So what we did was to design the tour. So we had to get a nod from the speaker's office on the scripts, and it had to be politically neutral, not really taking sides. And the whole idea was, can we bring people closer to the workings of democracy? Right, we are the largest democracy in the world, and the workings of democracy is a phenomenal. So we designed the entire tour, and we trained 10 folks, from a student to a software engineer. This happens every Sunday, and every second and fourth Saturday. You can go to the KCDC website and book it. I think the story of Vidhan Soudha itself is a phenomenal story of Kengal Hanumanthaiah and what he did. But I think what I came away with was a lot of appreciation, and it's very hard. Bureaucracy and politics is very hard, and I think what they do, and I have a lot of,
renewed respect.
Absolutely.
So we normally end with a postcard to Bangalore. If Vinay from Gully Tours had to write a postcard to Bangalore saying, "Dear Bangalore" or "Preetiya Bengaluru," what would you say?
Dear Bangalore, keep inspiring. So I very often tell people that there's no other big city in the world that I would rather live in but Bangalore. I think that's what I would say. I was at the Terminal 2 before its launch, and we did a tour of Terminal 2. and the person who was the chief horticulturist told us something fascinating. Because of the way Bangalore is situated between the shore and in the middle of the Deccan Plateau, he says trees from any part of the world not just survive, but they thrive here. And I feel that's exactly, I think, what's happening. People come and thrive here.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you for all your stories and for your love for the city. It comes through, it shines through. So thank you for your time, and thank you for this chat, and thank you for the story.
Thanks, Jimmy, for having me here. It's a phenomenal podcast.